March 11th, 2025 Port Washington Board of Education meeting. At this time, we will all rise for the flag salute. Pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States, back there from America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I will now ask the district clerk to please take a roll call.
Yes. Adam Smith.
Present.
Julie Epstein. Here. Sandra Alvarez. Here. Emily Bays. Present. Deborah Brooks. Here. Rachel Gilliar.
Not present.
Nanette Melkonian. Here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the March 11th, 2025 agenda. Do we have a second? Ms. Brooks, all in favor? 6-0. The agenda for March 11th today is adopted. We do not have a student performance. However, we will be recessing to executive session. So I would like to make a motion to recess to executive session to discuss employment of a particular person. Do I have a second? Ms. Melkonian, all in favor? 6-0. We are recessed to executive session. We expect to reconvene in public at approximately 7:30. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to reconvene in public session. Do we have a second? Ms. Melkonian, all in favor? 6-0. And,
Wait, aren't we 7-0 now?
I'm sorry, yes, right?
No, no.
Well, Rachel hasn't been roll called in, but technically,
Oh, okay.
yeah, 7-0. I don't know how that technically works, if she wasn't roll called in.
Doing it.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Would the district clerk please take a roll call?
Yes. Adam Smith?
Present?
Julie Epstein? Here. Sandra Alvarez? Here. Emily Bays? Present. Deborah Brooks? Here. Rachel Gilliar?
Here.
Nanette Melkonian?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Welcome, and I hope everyone has recovered from springing forward. It's been a very busy week. It's been a very busy few weeks in the district, filled with exciting events across all of our schools, from a variety of activities at the elementary level to Science Olympiad preparation at the middle school. There's been no shortage of engagement and learning. This past weekend, our high school students put on an incredible performance of Guys and Dolls, showcasing their talent and dedication to the arts. In addition, we witnessed a historic moment as our high school basketball team secured a record-breaking victory, winning the county championship for the first time since 1947. Congratulations to the team and coaches on this incredible achievement. We'd also like to remind everyone that the Parents' Council Spring Clothing Drive kicks off on March 24th. Now is the perfect time to clean out those closets and donate warm weather clothing for children and young adults, ages birth to 21. Your generosity will make a difference for families in need. Finally, we are deep in our budget process with adoption scheduled for April. Tonight's presentation will focus on closing the gap and outlining financial priorities for the 25-26 school year. This is just the beginning of several important discussions, and as always, any proposed additions remain proposals until the final budget is adopted. We extend our sincere thanks to Ms. Manuel, Dr. Shields, and all the budget builders for their dedication and hard work in preparing this year's budget, and we look forward to working through the process with our community over the next few months. With that, Dr. Shields, do you have a report?
Yes, sir. Just a few items. I echo the sentiments around the Guys and Dolls production this weekend. It was a full house here. I was at the Sunday production, and it was quite a joyous event. Just to add a little bit more to the high school basketball team, in case you're interested, the Long Island Championship is this Sunday, where Port Washington's boys basketball team will be playing against Half Hollow Hills East at 4 p.m., and that is at Farmingdale State College. If you're interested, please make sure you're following our athletic director, Nick Schrottweiser, where he posts all the links for tickets if you'd like to attend. Port Washington had 42 all-county artists, and their work was on display at Herrick's High School this past Sunday. It was a joy to be able to walk the presentation of the exhibit with Mr. Scully. And I also wanted to give an update to the community on the construction of our tennis courts. Just so you know, they've been delayed a couple of weeks. That has to do with the asphalt production plant not being ready on the timeline that we were looking for. Mr. Schrottweiser is monitoring this closely with Mr. Graham. And if the students who are playing tennis need to start off-site for the first week or two, he has that schedule in place if needed. Finally, I'll share with you that the enrollment report was calculated on March 5th. And at that time, we had 5,271 students in grades kindergarten through 12th. That's 38 more students than we had at this point last year. As a reminder, we're expecting an incoming kindergarten class in September of approximately 350 students, and we'll provide you updates as we get into the spring. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shields. Today, we do not have any recognitions, although obviously we look forward to an exciting one for our basketball team at our next meeting. But at this time, we are going to open our first opportunity for the community to be heard. Please state your full name. You'll have 3 minutes for a comment. Any questions will be answered when appropriate under old business at the following meeting, and please avoid any comments that are personal in nature. So Ms. Epstein is going to check the names. None. Does anybody wish to speak who didn't sign in? Going once? Going twice? Okay. That's great. We're going to move right into our first discussion item, which is the budget. So let's start with that. Ms. Manuel.
So good evening. Ms. Manuel and I look forward to walking you through a presentation this evening. Tonight is Budget Workshop Session Number 2. Our goal is to give you an update on how we have reduced the budget to stay within the allowable tax levy, and then share with you some priorities that we have identified as possible additions to the budget.
So tonight marks the second workshop of our 3 sessions that we have to present to the Board of Education. A public hearing discussing the proposed budget will take place on May 6th. Then the community vote and school board election will be held on May 20th. And over the next month and a half, we will be looking to tighten up our revenue and have more discussions with the board about our budget. This chart provides the estimated tax levy limit for Port Washington, and this is where the 1.17% increase in our tax base growth factor comes in, and our 2% increase in the tax levy figures. I won't go into this in too much detail as we've spoken about it in prior meetings. So just to review our budget work session from last February, we have an allowable levy-to-levy increase of $5.4 million, or 3.39% over prior school year's tax levy. Our student-focused budget drivers are health and safety, instructional program, as well as looking at operational efficiencies. So lastly, at the February 11th meeting, we discussed a decrease in the budgeted expense-based state aids. So this decrease was over $1 million compared to what was budgeted last year. And this accounts for about 80% of our decrease, or for the gap. So as always, we have a student-focused budget, and we'll be looking at strategic ways that we can reallocate funds to maintain and enhance our co-curricular and curricular programs that are in alignment with our board and district goals in our Portrait of a Graduate.
The next 2 slides are just a reminder for you that we should stay focused on the board and district goals and the Portrait of a Graduate as we build the proposed budget and set priorities for this budget process going forward.
So on February 11th, I am on, right? Okay, sorry. Our proposed expenditures were about $1.3 million above the allowable tax levy limit for Port Washington. So the Cabinet has worked with district administration to review expenditures, and we have made the following reductions. We've created software codes for all 7 buildings. This allows for oversight at the district level, so we could see where there were perhaps redundancies in the software. We can look at purchasing software that is more economical. We can have better economies of scale, if you will, and also to look at the usage of the software. We have also accounted for breakage related to another teacher retirement. The administrator for curriculum and instruction position was removed from the budget. We also believe we can reduce a speech position through attrition. We also have reductions in expenditures that look at the contractual cost too, as well as our transportation contractual and transportation efficiencies. So it's interesting to note, so doing all of this, we can be below the tax cap that is set for Port Washington. But it's also interesting to note that we're actually $1 million below what the allowable increase in the tax levy is on our expenditure side. So if it wasn't for the decrease in state aid, we would actually be in a very positive position right now.
So let's start by looking at efficiencies. As you know, we have 3 drivers that are helping us move the budget forward. It's important to us that we decrease costs in the budget and we look at them in a long-range perspective. So for example, with the expansion of our HVAC infrastructure, that's air conditioning and heating, we recommend that we hire our own HVAC mechanic and reducing our outsourced contractual expenditures. This will result in an initial new cost of $40,000, but it will decrease contractual costs immediately and over the long term. Transportation is another area where we see an ongoing opportunity for savings as we bring more bus runs in-house by purchasing another bus this year and adding a driver to our staff. Shared services with municipalities is another area of focus. We already have a shared agreement with the local police department when it comes to fuel, and we're expanding this into storage of salt and sand with the town. We're looking at long-range plans as well for centrally purchasing classroom and library furniture. We expect this to be more economical than departments and buildings purchasing things on their own. We would recommend allocating $15,000 in this budget to begin that process. So as you see this page titled Shaping Port's Future, I'm now transitioning to the health and safety and instructional program drivers, which are more front-facing and will be seen by our students and staff on a day-to-day basis. So health and safety. We've reviewed the new regulation related to the maximum allowable temperatures in our classrooms, and we've also met with the 7 principals to review the priorities in order to move forward with this expectation of temperatures in classrooms. We'd like to add 10 air conditioner units per year to improve our quality during those high temperature days. We would continue that on for the next 2 years following as well. At the December district safety team meeting, the need to develop a strategic plan to purchase AED units was discussed. This would allow us to routinely update our equipment. A 5-year strategic plan has been developed with $10,000 allocated in the first year. We'd like to have the option to leave more devices in school overnight in charging stations. For example, in first grade would be our first priority, and then second grade would be our second priority. They're already kept in school for kindergarten. And you can see the allocations of putting charging stations in each one of those classrooms. And lastly, Mr. Maloney has identified GoGuardian as a device monitoring software to install. This will be funded through the current budget allocations, but we thought it was important to share that with you because it's something that's been discussed here at public board meetings. So we wanted to make sure you realized it was heard and we're moving forward with that in a way that's not costing new money to the budget. So let us shift to the instructional program. It's been reviewed from multiple perspectives. The first 2 items on this list are educational materials directly supporting the implementation of the new next generation science standards. We're recommending that we increase field trip budget at Weber to help cover busing to the Holocaust Museum and Tolerance Center and for off-site performances of the orchestra. SEPTA has been working with our principals to bring in disability awareness speakers to all our schools next year. And we'd like to help support that initiative because we see it as important for our students. Mr. Schrottweiser, our Director of Athletics, Health, and Physical Education, has asked that we establish a JV cheerleading team to support the growing interest among our students. Unfortunately, this past year, several students were not able to participate in that athletic team because we just couldn't handle all of them with the staff that we had. And while it's not a new cost, I just want to highlight we are continuing professional development in the area of math, literacy, and the state standards. So the second slide related to instructional program are staffing considerations. As we look at the instructional program, I'd like to have the flexibility to potentially add 3 teachers. These areas are listed in priority order. First, try to build elementary classes that are 1 less than the board policy. If that is possible, and we haven't used all 3 teachers, then I would look to add a guidance counselor at Weber. This new guidance counselor would decrease caseloads and allow all 5 counselors to meet more frequently with students and be able to communicate more often with parents. The mental health of our students continues to be a focus. The third priority in this area is if a new teacher was still available after satisfying those first 2 priorities, would be the addition of a business teacher at the high school who would teach financial literacy. Putting this in place before it becomes a state requirement in 2027 would be proactive, and I know it's a course that the community, and as recently as today, students mentioned, and they've been advocating for it. You saw the reduction of the curriculum office administrator in Kathy's earlier slide. I'm recommending the addition of an assistant director of PPS as a priority. This was recommended in the December 2023 audit of the PPS department. I see it as critical for the department to be able to effectively engage with families, or more effectively engage, let me say, ensure consistency of practices across all buildings, and monitor the pragmatic supports prior to the CSE referral. I reviewed the number of PPS administrators in comparison to other districts, and this would bring us more into alignment with them. So slide number 14, you can see the overall priorities that I've just shared with you. They add up to approximately $800,000. $100,000 in the area of health and safety, roughly $650,000 in the area of instructional program, and $55,000 in the area of efficiencies. Step 1 was identifying the priorities. Step 2 is now with the work that lies ahead of us, which is seeing, can we reallocate funding from within our budget and cover this without exceeding the tax cap? So I hope the board is able to see the very methodical process that we're going through as we build a proposed budget for next year. Tonight we showed you how we reduced the overall budget to the allowable tax increase. We felt that was step number 1. And then we shared with you tonight the priorities that we would recommend for possible inclusion in the 25-26 budget. The next step's a challenging one. Over the next 2 weeks, the administrative team would like to see if we can find ways to work these priorities into a budget which keeps us within that 3.39% budget increase. But before we continue that budget development process, what's very important from us is that we get feedback from you. So we would like to know if you have any questions, and we'd also like to know if we've missed any potential priorities that you have that we may not have thought of during this process.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Manuel and Dr. Shields. So I just want to reframe the conversation now. So effectively what you guys have done is brought us to, you've taken the rollover budget that originally had us at 1.2 million over, we're almost 1.3 million over where we needed to be through certain changes and reductions and just natural attrition. We've been able to close that gap. You've also proposed efficiencies that should, of about $55,000 that should theoretically be budget neutral, correct? Or even? Okay, that's what I was. Yeah.
So for the HVAC position, that would cost about, I think it was 50,000 or 40,000. So we see that as a cost avoidance because every time we have new building, we put air conditioning in, and with the new max temp law, we'd
Okay.
be, so the contractual would increase if we didn't have this position. We would have to increase it like 150,000.
So that's budget, that's better than budget neutral, then theoretically, right?
Kind of, yeah.
But it would cost us more if we didn't do it. So those are things we must do. There's no question about it.
Exactly.
So really what we're talking about is, and what you're asking the board is, so now that you've done all of that, you have these 100,000 of health and safety and these 650,000, give or take, of instructional program that you would like to add. And the ask is, does the board agree that you guys should start digging into your budget and try to find another 650 to 800, I guess $800,000 to focus on these priorities? So that's the question that you're asking of the board. I just want to make sure everybody was on the same page that that's the question.
Yes, that's true, yes.
And the last question is, do we have anything else? And hopefully hopefully anything else we have would have already been included in the board goals and whatnot. So, Ms. Alvarez, would you like to start? Questions, comments, feedback, or not?
I'm fine to go first. I'll have to come back to one because I'm trying to look up something,
Okay,
but
let's start. You want me to start at the other?
yes, please.
Okay. Would you? We also don't have
I
to
can go first. I'm
Deb,
happy.
No, how about
Good.
Deb and then
I'm good,
Sandra,
I'm
you can go
good.
right after
I'm
Deb. Let Deb go. And
I'm almost there. It's the state run.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I just want to have one question, and I know we'll discuss further at the budget meeting, but I just want to ask again to reiterate. So with regards to the instructional increases in the 3 staff members, if I understood you correctly, you believe that 3 staff members, just 3 FTEs, let's put it this way, 3 FTEs can help you to reduce the elementary school sections by 1? Is that what I understood? And the remaining, that's the goal, right? I think that's the real question is the board supportive of adding 3 FTEs that would help you to reduce elementary staff by 1? Sections, we make the section, the caps.
I think we have to be careful
with that.
what we're saying though, is that he's asking the board for 3 FTEs
Yes.
that would be applied to these priorities.
Yes.
No, that's
Yes.
my clarification. So if you could just clarify, is goal number 1 in the 3 FTEs to get the class size, the policy down by 1?
How many teachers?
That,
So that's why it was important to me to frame it in the sense of priorities, right? And my goal is to accomplish priority 1 and see if there's positions left beyond the 3 to then look at guidance at the middle school.
right, so priority 1 is to bring down the class size maximum by 1 in each of the sections. That's what I'm trying to understand where we're
Sure.
doing that.
Yeah, so for example, in grades 3 through 5, the class size cap is 26 students. What I'd like to do is I'd like to work with the administration and in next year's grades 3 through 5, have, instead of it being 26, can we build classes where the cap is 25 or less?
Exactly how I understood that, thank you.
So I'm just
that's
giving you an
only,
example to
that's in
clarify.
3 to 5, what about K to 2?
So K to 2, cap is 23, can we build classes of 22?
So if we took K to 2 to 22, 3 to 5 to 25 as the cap, you believe that 3 FTEs could potentially get you there?
So
Or maybe less, right?
That-
Because
my-
there may
that
be
is my-
room for more.
that is my hope. I can't predict how enrollment will change over the next 6 months, but that is the first thing I would like to focus on.
Very good. That's what I wanted, that's how I understood it, and I wanted to make sure we all were on the same page. Thank you. That was my only question.
But to be clear, you're not proposing at this moment to change the policy. You're proposing to provide FTEs to have all the classes at the policy -1. You're not, that's what you're proposing right now.
Correct. I'm not suggesting we go and adjust the policy. I'm suggesting that from a practice standpoint, we see if we can improve class size at the elementary level with this approach.
Go, Julie, Ms. Epstein.
And can I just clarify from that, is that this is something that happens during the summer period. So this would be after the budget is approved, that the allocation of these 3 FTEs would really be decided based on what enrollment looks like as we go through the summer months, correct?
So I think we have to wait as long as is reasonable, right? So if that means we look at it as of May 1st, or we look at that as of July 1st, I think we have to see what's the trend that we're seeing in enrollment, because we still want to be able to recruit if that's necessary. Yeah.
Can I just ask a question on that? I can still go other people before me, but because you lost me now on the class size discussion, because I read the slides very differently than it's being discussed now. So the overall 650 number is on 3 FTEs, right? That's a total of 3 FTEs if you're going through this budget scenario. Is that right? 3 FTEs?
But just,
Doesn't matter where, but just 3 FTEs
But
is the 658.
3 FTEs do not total 658.
Well, no, with the below administrator. 3
Plus-
FTEs and the
plus-
administrator.
Plus all of the things on the prior slide. There were, right, the science kits and
Yes,
that.
but it's 3 FTEs. Yeah, so I'm in the middle of trying to find the class size budget that the budget committee already. We went through these numbers, so I'm just trying to grasp how we get from that budget discussion already that listed out all the scenarios already financially with the implications of changing a class size policy to only needing 3 FTEs potentially, or even relooking at any numbers. So for me, you're not making any suggestions on class size. You're just discussing this total number of 658, inclusive of everything on this list, for 3 FTEs potentially.
58 is not the 3 FTEs. It's 120,
With all of them,
Right.
with everything.
times 3.
Okay, so
Think about that.
360 for 3 FTEs. But that would mean then we're not looking at anything else, right? So the priority would be that first one, not review, number 2, number 3, because that would go from 800, inclusive of everything, higher.
they're asking the board to approve them to hunt for money for 3 FTEs, and then they will utilize those FTEs.
When
in
we
this
say
priority.
hunt, there's a word that we use, reduction here,
Well,
right?
they're gonna
So
hunt for
they're gonna
reductions.
cut elsewhere.
If they can.
If needed, if directed
Right.
or advised or opinions given right now of 360.
Correct.
Okay.
See if they can find that money, and then it'll be applied to class size first, then the next 2 in that cascading order. Presumably not the second 2.
Okay,
Right.
thank you. I'll ask my other questions later.
Okay. Let's go Ms. Brooks and then Ms. Alvarez.
Okey doke. So, how close is the maximum, I'm going to just go in the order of the presentation. How close is the maximum temp law to being set in stone without amendment, without waivers, caveats, so forth?
So the latest version I've seen is they've built in language where practical, right? Where practical is that you would need to move classes out of an environment where there's 88 degrees or higher. So they have built in flexibility for us, which I appreciate. But the feedback that we got from the 7 principals is that if we could start phasing in some additional classrooms, it'll make that more manageable. And we were going to focus, on 10 this year, and then if we can, another 10 next year, and then another 10 the following year.
So we have this capital fund, capital improvement fund, is it called capital improvement, right? And we know that there's something like a $70 million figure to get the central air conditioning and the UNIVACs and all that. So I'm imagining that we will not get to that point for quite some time, and that the way we're going to cool our buildings is through window units and upgraded electrical. So can our buildings right now, after the work that I think we're doing soon, will the buildings be able to handle extra units running through the hot weather That's my first question.
So it depends on the electric, if the availability also, because sometimes, is it LIPA or National Grid? They can't supply it, but yes, that's what the incoming electrical upgrades are going to accomplish.
So we'll be able to, we won't have hopefully brownouts in the buildings and things like that.
Not due to us.
Have we given any consideration to how much we spend on the other end onto heating our schools and being able to cut costs there? And I'm not talking about freezing children out the way it happened in Schreiber, but has anybody looked at that efficiency to make sure we're not overheating, or, because we could, if there's a possibility to save on fuel oil to offset, having to buy air conditions is that
Right,
a
so
possibility?
actually, we don't use fuel oil, we use natural gas.
Sorry,
but-
that's, yeah, thank you.
But I know Mr. Graham is very conscientious of the envelope of the buildings and making sure they're secure. We do have pneumatic controls, but sometimes it does get hot. People open up windows and stuff, but we do work to keep the heating costs down as well.
And have we given any thought to the increased electrical cost that additional window units is going to create? And also sometimes teachers want to run these units year-round, I have seen. So are we okay? In other words, if we invest in these units, are we going to be able to handle the ancillary costs that come with it?
So that is something that Mr. Graham has definitely considered. He's spoken with me about it. Just because we have air conditioners doesn't mean it has to run all of the time. We could have a level where they're turned on so that students are comfortable. It might not be constantly at 70 degrees. It could be at 83 or something. So he has considered that.
Okay, and I don't know if this is an exact question, so if it is, somebody tell me. Eliminating the administrator in the CIA department, I assume that somebody has decided how these responsibilities will be reallocated? Well, that kind of is a budget question, because will more staff need to be hired to take over those responsibilities, or are those responsibilities going to be distributed otherwise, or is this an executive session question?
I can share with you that we have started those conversations. That's been an important part of the process so far. There will need to be more details involved in that. But yes, we've certainly discussed that as a cabinet.
I guess the question is, will there be costs associated with, even though we're eliminating a position, are there going to be costs associated with redistributing, whether it's stipends or, has that been taken into consideration? Because we've eliminated the gap, but now we're creating a new gap. So I'm just looking to make sure that the new gap doesn't become even bigger.
Understandable. It's a very fair question. Our goal is to avoid any new additions to cover the costs of that removal.
Okay, and with the 3 teachers, I just want to understand correctly. If necessary, the 3 teachers would be allocated solely to the elementary school for class size, if necessary, either 1 or 2 or 3. And if 1, then we move on to the middle school guidance counselor and the high school business teacher. If 2, then we have the middle school guidance counselor, and the financial literacy falls off until another time. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Thank you. Okay, those were my, sorry. Any chance that we're going to get more in state aid? Or I know somebody was trying to talk to our legislators about getting grants, or any surprise money coming to us?
So there was a February 15th run for state aid. Ours actually decreased $3,000. So I don't see any more money coming our way. I think the legislatures were very happy with the executive budget. So they don't typically see, I think they're happy with it. I know we did have a discussion with a couple of legislatures. So in this, in the prior presentation I made to you, I had taken out the $125,000 that we receive in this year for the playgrounds, but that I put back in because we will be asking for that, as well as additional projects. However, those, if there was anything more than the 125, it would likely increase the transfer to capital where we could do other projects.
Do we know if we're getting that money? We
The
are?
one, yeah.
Okay, 125. Thank you.
Ms. Alvarez?
Is it my turn? I have some questions on the closing the gap. So I know it says the word updated special ed contractual. What does that mean, the reduction of 132?
So Ms. Mack and I go through the budget together. We looked at some of the contractual codes with BOCES and different contractual expenditures, and we saw a couple of redundancies. So as you go through the budget process and you have different budget builders in there, some people may have accounted for something in a code that we've accounted for already. So we really took a fine-tooth comb and went through it. So that's what that was.
So no change in special education actual contracts?
No.
Okay. And then for the transportation contractual, transportation efficiencies, that's around 300,000 reduction. We've had the transportation discussions at budget, and then we also got the state runs on transportation aid. So there is a reduction on our aid in transportation. So I'm just wondering, how is there a 300,000 reduction in those two areas?
Sure. So reduction in the transportation aid isn't due to a decrease in expenditures for transportation. Our transportation expenditures have actually increased quite a bit. The reduction is because our full valuation for our property has increased. So that forced a decrease in the aid ratio. So that accounts for almost all of that decrease in the transportation aid. As far as the efficiencies in transportation, this year we purchased a large school bus, and we've been doing athletic trips and field trips. She's estimating that she saves over $12,000 a month doing those runs. So that's $120,000 a year at least. So that's where you see that. We also have gone out for an RFP for our transportation. Those results came in very close and very favorable for the district. So I think we would be able to see also BOCES, what we had budgeted for BOCES transportation was a 29% increase in transportation. So we decided to go out for an RFP for that as well to see if we could do better. And I believe we can do better than that. So that's why you see those reductions.
Okay, thank you. I know that you mentioned the transportation savings in the budget meeting. Mm-hmm. I didn't realize that's what we're talking about for next year's budget as far as the savings. So thank you. I just have a question on the blue ribbon, the requirement for the business teacher financial literacy. I think you mentioned it. What's the actual start year that's a requirement, 2027? So it's not an actual necessity for this coming year.
Correct. That's why I ranked it third.
Okay. And then just a question on that, if it were somehow to make it into the rankings for this cycle or future cycles, is there currently an ability to add that position with current staff and structure at the high school?
Sorry, so are we able to add?
Vehement head turning.
Is there a way with current staffing
to add the financial
or
literacy?
structure of sections to, I'll just keep going until the head shakes differently. No.
Ms. Alvarez, I asked our
yeah.
principal that exact question, yeah. I was hopeful, but I was told no.
Okay. And this isn't specific to this, but in the budget process, just trying to learn it more, I know this lists positions, right? So this lists 3 potential areas of needs. and really the word FTEs. So even though it listed the district, if the district were to change needs come the summertime, the budget process passes, the FTE position is just a budgetary position. It's not necessarily that because we see a presentation today listing an actual position, doesn't mean the district is bound to do that after the budget passes.
Correct. The board, and then later on, hopefully the community, is approving a budget as an overall number. And then how we allocate it can be adjusted if needed, but that number can't change.
Strive to be consistent.
We would, of course, want to strive from being forthright and transparent with the community to deliver on what we present, of course.
Thank you. And then for the guidance counselor, so I haven't heard much about guidance like just this year, just from going to curriculum and going to just being at the board meetings. So I'm just trying to understand what's the current structure of the middle school with guidance counselors.
Yeah, so we have one guidance counselor per house. We have 4 houses at the middle school, so there's 4 guidance counselors. This 5th guidance counselor would end up working with all 4 houses and decrease the caseload of those 4 guidance counselors that are currently staffed at the middle school. Hence, our expectation is there being more student contact time and greater communication with families.
Okay, and then just to confirm from last year's budget, changes, reductions, whatever words we want to use, was it last year's cycle or 2 cycles ago that there was a high school guidance counselor that was reduced?
Last year.
Okay, but in the priorities, part-time. Okay, so in the priorities, in the discussion with the cabinet, it seems that even though that role had been reduced last year, in this new request, the priority would be for the middle school edition.
True.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I could just clarify, that position, I believe, was funded through the American Rescue Plan. Yeah, so that's why that funding ceased.
Okay, thank you. And then someone sent me the class size. Thank you. So the budget committee did go through the class size scenarios, and I know that we're not discussing changing a policy. That's not what is being discussed right now. But the reality of looking at any adjustments based on needs. So even the review of that one sheet that is public already with the class size, if the policy were to change by 1, it was an implication of, based on that projections of like only 170,000 or 130,000. But if the class size policy were to change by 2, which then that means, in my mind, that if we're only looking to look at the class size of 1 adjustment, overall in the whole district, only 1 potential, K-5, thank you. There was only 1 potential scenario that would need an FTE. But if we went beyond that, there was it went up to 880 something. There was a lot more. So realistically, is that there is no in between that I'm visualizing where it would be a really, lack of a better word, fair way to really discuss the 2 different scenarios. It's in my eyes, I know we're seeing this 1, 2, 3 different scenarios, but 3 total FTEs. Based on the projections that the budget committee already did with Ms. Emanuel, it is either going to be $123,000 if you were to change 1 classroom based on the projections already listed, versus going 2 class sizes down, and then we hit multiple other classrooms, that it's going to be more than 3 FTEs. Is that making sense to anyone?
So just to be clear, Ms. Alvarez, what they're proposing to us is to reduce by 1 FTE. So and the reason that they're giving you 3 choices is because those 3 FTEs might be able to cover all 3, but they're not going to know until May or later what the actual numbers will be based on enrollment. So we're hedging here by saying, hey, we'd like to go for 3, but they might only be able to find money for 1. And if they only find money for one, that's definitely going towards elementary class size. They might find money for two, and if they find money for two, hopefully it gets you elementary class size and a middle school guidance counselor, but maybe there's an extra kid and they need it, and they need two for elementary. Does that answer the, and this is all hypothetical, we don't have the money for this yet.
I think, can I also just add that the other reality is that when we had this conversation in the budget meeting, our enrollment numbers actually did look very different, because since then, other elementary classes have gone up and down since then. And I don't know how much time we spent just on the reduction at the one level, but at that time, there was one section that really only needed it, and now they are building in this priority, the possibility that there may be more based on changes in enrollment.
Yeah, I'm good.
So remember, once we approve this, we're not approving this, we're approving them to go see if they can
Oh, I know.
even do this.
Yes.
This might all be not happening, right? Ms. Epstein?
No, my questions have been asked so far.
Okay. Ms. Gilliar?
Thank you for the recommendations. I really appreciate them. They make sense to me. To my mind, at least some FTEs going towards class size should be a non-negotiable for all of us. I think, and Sandra, it's not aimed at you, but like your questions are sort of making me think about what we think of as normal here. And I think because of the financial straits that we've been in for the last several years, we've gotten used to a normal that was not our normal here. So we've been seeing class sizes that are much larger than what anybody wanted, right? The board, the administration, the teachers, the parents, nobody wants to see some of the class sizes that we've seen at the elementary level, but we couldn't address it. And I think at this point, especially when we have the relative luxury at being at the moment where we're at even, that we can actually look and solve some of these problems, I really think that we should treat that as a priority that must happen, and we have to figure out what the trade-off can be, because I think the science on this is very clear, right? That elementary kids shouldn't be in a class of 26. The reason I said I want to reset what our normal is that we've had this ongoing conversation about class size for the last several years that I think created an antagonism in the process that really shouldn't be there and never existed previously. So Sandra, when you're talking about like lowering it by one, I think it's a great goal. But in the past, every conversation that I witnessed about class size pre-COVID was really the administration coming to us and saying, we need to add an FTE here. And it was never because an elementary class cohort in a building was at the max. That never happened before now, at least in recent memory. It was because the administration in central office, in consultation with the building administration and the teachers in that building, assessed various factors that were not, hey, we're going to be at this number.
Ms. Gilliar, I was going to stop. I think that.
I'm at 3 minutes.
But you're
You're allowed to let
what you're stating what they're already doing. And I think everybody sees that, is that Dr. Shields is saying, we are asking you for more elementary FTEs to do exactly what you're saying.
No, I'm not criticizing him. I'm saying
Yeah.
I think that we should take one step even further back from it, though, and we shouldn't get overly technical and be talking about, is it one down, is it two down? Like, this is great. Like, this should be our priority, and I think we should trust our administration to be looking at these various cohorts in the building, as I'm sure they intend to be doing over the next several months, and saying to us, hey, we think it should be one FTE, we think it should be two FTEs, we think it should be three, because we're trying to bring things back down to where they should have been and where we wanted them to be all along, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Not to cut you off, but to cut you off a little bit, because you did go over the 3 minutes, is I think maybe you misunderstood where my line of questionings was coming from. I try to be very realistic with information presented to me and really understand what's being presented to me before I make any sort of decision. And for me, vagueness causes issues and sentiments later on. So I was trying to be very specific to know what we're discussing, because I think it is important to all of us. I think Budget Committee spent a lot of time reviewing this because it is important to the full board. And the numbers exist. So the numbers weren't adding up in my own mind with what was presented and what we've reviewed at Budget Committee. So that's where I just wanted clarification, not because I don't want to agree with the priorities, but I want to make sure that I'm being realistic with the financial implication for prioritizing such a request. That was it.
So Dr. Shields, you have presumably, hold on. You have presumably looked at this, or you wouldn't be making this ask. And is it fair to say that you believe with 3 or fewer teachers, you'll be able to have every elementary class at one below the current caps? Have you done that analysis?
I have done the analysis, and I think
Right.
that is the appropriate target to set at this stage of the game, based on the enrollment where it is right now. Another variable we're going to have to pay attention to is the incoming kindergarten class. It's projected at 350, but if it shows up at 400, it's going to change the playing field on which I'm working on, right? So there are other variables that are in play, but I think it's important to set a clear expectation at this stage in the game. We have an enrollment report as recent as last week. We've looked at it closely. And I think the good bar to set right now is let's try to go forward with the approach of -1 from the current board max. And of course, look at every cohort separately as well, but let's try and set that as the expectation in the process for now.
Right, and I'll say, you want to keep going? So to that point, that expectation would only be able to be met if you're able to find at least $360,000. And do you feel that there is a path to that? Because you've already been working, Ms. Manuel, on closing the gap. Do you have a path to, these asks that we're talking about? Is this a realistic exercise?
I didn't hear that, just to clarify, I didn't hear that you necessarily need all 3 FTEs to get to that point.
Yes.
You say
You're
you need
correct.
all?
No,
you're
you're
saying
correct. That's why I gave
maybe
us-
up to 3.
That's right. That's
Up
why.
to 3 is
Yeah.
clear.
I'm asking for, here are those priorities. And I hope we don't have to dedicate all 3 to the elementary priority as number 1. But if we do, because there's something that changes,
Kindergarten.
we would have to look at that. But if, for example, if it's only 1 that's needed to help on the elementary class size, then we have choice 2 and choice 3 prepared for us. And I wanted to be upfront about that.
Right.
So to answer your question, where we are now is what I've done in where I can control things. So I believe that at the next meeting, we're going to say, okay, if we would like this position, we have this here that we do, what serves the most children or our priorities best? And it's going to be difficult discussions because we can't add any more to the budget, so we have to look to reallocate things. It's not something that I think we wanted to see what's super important to you that's a really, because it is a difficult process to go through all of our program and what we're doing and how it's being delivered to say, okay, we can find this, because it's not going to be easy. We don't have a lot of cushions in this budget. As you've seen, last year's budget did not have a lot to add back to our reserves. We were very tight this year because we pierced the cap, which is something we don't want to go through again. So these will be difficult things to actually find. It's not like there's fluff in here that I can, reach into, so.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to follow up on that. Mr. Keller, it's still your floor if you had more questions.
So overall, though, I appreciate the ranking, and I think probably my fellow board members agree. Like, I feel like I am not the person to be deciding where these 3 FTEs should go, but I appreciate the roadmap of here's where we're thinking the priorities are, and I do agree with the priority list, and I appreciate it. I had 2 questions. The air conditioners, so is the cost for this year for the air conditioning actually is $300,000?
No, in total, it was going to be over 3 years, so I think he had Is it 60 or two? It was 60,000, I believe.
So it says 10 units a year.
Right.
So
So
it
there-
is
So it's 90
30,000.
each year.
Yeah, it's
So
$30,000
$30,000.
for
Okay,
next
it's
year's
lower than I
budget.
thought it was.
The cost is roughly $3,000 per.
Okay,
And that includes the installation and, the equipment itself. So that would be 30,000 in year one, which would equal 10 units. And then we would like to do 10 units each year the following 2 years.
okay, that's great. And I'm assuming, I thought I was potentially multiplying by 10 there, so that, I'm very happy to find that out. I'm assuming that if it has hit the point where you're presenting it to us like this, that this is not something that neatly fits into, the energy contract that we were thinking about doing, not anything that's going to neatly fit into any sort of different kind of building upgrade. We really just have to go with the old-fashioned window units. Okay. And then my last question is, can you tell us a little bit more detail on the disability awareness speakers and what that program is about?
Yeah, so for those of you who are following along, that's on slide 12. Disability awareness speakers. SEPTA is trying to work with all 7 building principals under the leadership of Dr. Allen to bring in a speaker to increase awareness around disabilities for each school. That's a new initiative they have. So the SEPTA organization is picking up the majority of the cost, but we wanted to try and support some of that cost to try and bring in a speaker to every school, not just a couple of schools.
So this cost is like an assembly for each school?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Malconia?
Thank you. So I'm going to ask some process questions first. Please forgive me. Am I reading the tea leaves right, that on the 25th, we're discussing how much of the 800 we have found, and then we have to decide how we spend it?
So our goal is to come back to you on the 25th with some clarity on how we've done on finding that 800 roughly, and what we've prioritized out of what we've been able to glean from that process.
Okay. And so, and just for, I guess, for us to focus on in the community, that when we see this list, this is really developed through consult with your principals and with central office and with Dr. Allen, et cetera, talking about the priorities of each of our buildings and what our leaders see as the needs within these buildings. And then we have to prioritize that.
Yes. These items have come forward through the budget development process where different departments and building leaders are meeting with the business office. And then there's actually additional meetings that sometimes take place where principals are asked to come and meet with me and set priorities within their asks.
Okay. So with that in mind, I apologize if this is an ignorant question and/or appearing to be offensive and assume someone doesn't know or hasn't thought of something, like I'm brilliant and I came up with something absolutely out of the box, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. In terms of, we've talked about bringing services back because it's cheaper to provide services with our own staff versus vendors, et cetera, or other professionals. So are there services that we can hire from within that would be more effective? And/or I'm a big fan of staff within our district because of the loyalty, because of understanding the community, because of understanding our families, et cetera, rather than contractual people that come in. So have we maximized that capacity?
So I'm going to let Ms. Manuel answer in a little bit, but I want
Sorry, I
you,
had
but one of the things we did look at as what we were doing is we're going through all the departments that we have in the district and looking at where we have some contractual providers and asking ourselves, could we bring such and such a title instead of it being a contractual into a permanent employee? there's pros and cons to that because sometimes the service is always changing. But I'll let Ms. Manuel add on to that.
So that's a really good question, and no question is ignorant, that's for sure, because we did actually have the same discussion, and we spoke with Dr. Allen about nurse contractual. That's a really difficult position. We have quite a few nurses retiring or moving to other districts. So our contractual for that increases. So we have a nurse on a bus. So we looked at, could we maybe hire internally, like monitors to go on the bus? So we've looked at that. We've also looked at having OTPT, people that we hire. But our fear was, what if we can't actually hire those people because it is difficult to hire the people? So what we've done is we've budgeted as we have in the past for that. And if during the year we can actually hire someone, we will do that and transfer the money out of contractual into a salary code. And then we would have, at the end of the year, a little bit of surplus if we're fortunate enough. So that's kind of our plan with that, to gradually do it. Kind of with our bus process and the drivers. We don't want to hire like 20 drivers all at once because it's difficult to find the staffing. And we feel if we do it gradually, it's a little more realistic. So we have looked at, we've been trying to overturn every rock we can to see efficiency.
Well, it's both a budget question and it's for me it's a philosophical question of having our staff be our staff.
Yes,
rather
yes.
than
Agreed, because we feel there's a certain culture here at Port Washington, and I just see it in our drivers as well, and all of the staff here. There's a certain culture here that we appreciate.
right. So yeah. So I think it's like it has more benefits than just the financial. Okay. So I think those were my points and questions. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I have two more questions, I'm sorry. Was there any discussion of adding the preschool section back in? And I'm guessing that seeing the other priorities, if there was a discussion, this is just not feasible this year.
It did not make a priority list.
Okay. Was it even part of a discussion? Just curious.
We did not focus on it,
Okay.
no.
Then for the device charging stations, it looks like about $60,000 for first and second grade. So this goes back to my question over the years. How much software do we need to buy? How many devices do we need? Because this is this rolling snowball that just keeps gathering more just dollar signs as it gets bigger. And I'm just wondering, are the devices being used effectively? And are they being overused to the extent, like, why would we need charging stations for these grades? Are these devices being used so much that they're running out of juice, or what is, just so I understand what so they can stay in the classroom? So now they're being charged at home?
Yes.
Correct, they're being
And you're-
charged at home.
And then what were the lockers, or was that only for kindergarten?
This is the same thing for 2 more grades.
This is the same thing, but for the other grades. And is it working effectively in kindergarten, these
It
lockers?
gives us the flexibility to keep them all in school. And right now, we don't have that flexibility in first or second.
Okay, thanks.
And it's also a storage option and securing the devices, so they're in one location, they can be locked.
Okay, thank you very much. Most of my questions were answered, but I will say that we're in a much better place than we expected to be now at this time last year. So I think that, a lot of things, we got lucky in a lot of ways, and also from being very forward-thinking last year, I think you guys were able to put us on a better footing for this year. So thank you, and congratulations to everyone for that.
I'm sorry, so do we have homework to do now between now
I'm
and the
getting to that
next? You
now.
are getting,
So
okay, just so we know what we're supposed to be
I didn't
doing.
hear anybody say anything about any of these priorities. So what I'm hearing by that is that everyone thinks these are great priorities. We'd love to see them happen. However, we look forward to next meeting, which is the 25th, right? On the 25th, when you will
I'm
come back
sorry.
with what the trade-offs will be if we're able to afford these priorities. So at the following meeting, we will hear what we will have to trade for these priorities to make this happen.
I was just gonna say, the reason I was gonna put my hand, but you made the homework, there's no homework, but
They have homework.
love these priorities is a strong word based on like this next meeting, so.
Well, no, they're admirable priorities. We just don't know what they will cost and what the trade will be. Maybe none of them will happen. Maybe some of them will happen. We'll find out when you tell us what we'd be cutting instead. So,
That was one of my questions. Are we going to hear what comes out of the budget for that 800 as well as what we're putting in?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
okay, great. So, thank you very much. With that, we are going to move to our second discussion item tonight, which is the student board member. And as everybody knows, this is to the board, we have a requirement to add a student board member to our board. My proposal is that we would talk about broadly what the board would like to see, come up with, so I have a long list of questions here that are kind of brought out of the NISBA policy. I'd love, and it's correct, and I'd love to go in the Howard policy. So we took all of the questions from the NISBA and the bond policies. We have them all laid out here. I'd like to just hopefully quickly go through them and then refer the answers back to the policy committee who would actually incorporate it into a policy.
And this policy has to be on the books, I want to say by the summer, am I
I think by
right?
the end of the school year would be the goal.
By July or?
Yeah, there's a, July 1.
We have to elect a student, I thought, by July 1.
Right.
So
So
we have to have
finish
the
this school
policy
year.
this school year and then have the elections and things in process between now and July 1st.
So I'm going to read the questions, and then I will kind of suggest, give some, in some cases, I'm going to have some suggestions for what we might pick, and then we can discuss them and refer that. So the first question is, how will the student be chosen? A couple of choices are student body president, elected by the student body, appointed by the high school principal, appointed by the superintendent, or appointed by the board. My suggestion is appointed by the board. We'll start with Ms. Alvarez, because this could be a simple vote.
Yep, just before I answer, this can change, right? This is policy for this coming year, but
Correct.
as all policies can change.
Policy can always be amended,
Yep.
yeah.
So we did have as Ms. Epstein knows and Dr. Schultz and Dr. Bear, we did have a roundtable with high school students today, got feedback. I really tried to listen to the students who also had mixed reviews on their own responses. And I brought this back to them, and I'll bring it back here of how I feel with my answer. But a trustee is voted by the whole community. The trustee is decided by the whole community. And as I explained to these young students, because I know the concern of the popular vote, as it is when you just let the students decide something for like student president, whatnot. But I told them a trustee could just be a popular vote. Doesn't mean that I am the right fit for this position. There's no way to say, without seeing how the 3 years go, that this was actually, that I was any better than any of the other people that ran at the same time as me. That is how elections go. So for me, I heard the feedback. I really try to process it. I understand the negative connotations with doing a popular vote, but that's how the U.S. government runs. That's how all of us were elected. So for me, my vote would be to do a full student body vote, have no input from any adult, and let the students decide.
Okay. Ms. Brooks?
I'm thinking, pass.
Okay. So Ms. Alvarez, when you spoke to the students, so when Ms. Epstein had.
Half and half.
When we met with them last year, we asked the same question, and I had also gotten the vibe that more so they were not too excited about the popular vote idea. So that's where I had also formed my idea of the board appointment. But Ms. Brooks?
I was thinking also in order, I think the board is in the best position to understand what happens on the board and to be able to look at a student's resume, for lack of a better word. I am concerned about the popularity contest. And I think that this is, I understand how the community votes for us, but the community is adults voting for, hopefully, voting for hopefully adults. And I think if we're going to be working with somebody, it would be helpful if that person could show us their qualifications. And if we know a student, we recuse ourselves. But that way, it's not based on popularity, it's based on genuine interest, and it's almost like the Board of Regents being elected by the legislators, kind of thing, so.
Ms. Bays? I got bored from.
I'm saying board, yeah. I'm not saying that the board has to draft the qualifications, but.
Let's, yeah.
That's fine, we're only on the first question, okay.
Right. Ms. Bays? And guys, if you want to just say your position, you don't have, we have a lot of these, so I think it's better if everyone just says their answer.
I'm indifferent.
Yeah.
I'll go with the consensus. I think there's pros and cons to both. I think, to Mrs. Alvarez's point, it's the way elections are done, whether it's a popularity contest or not. I don't think that the board is going to be really objective either, so I don't think, I didn't get to decide which fellow board members I have, like this.
But you would have liked to.
I had a vote, so I think a vote is a vote.
Yeah.
So I'm going to that, I'm kind of leaning in that sense.
So just pick your choice.
So I'll go with student body, how's that?
Okay. Ms. Epstein?
I go with board.
Okay. Ms. Gilliar?
Honestly, I'm going back and forth. The only thing I would say is we do have an option here for it to be the student body president, and I absolutely don't think we should do that one because I think that's a different job.
Correct.
And I don't think we should mess with that job by tacking
For sure.
this job on. And the other thing that I would ask is, do we know if our high school administration has an opinion on this?
Yes, they do.
They do.
Do we know what it is?
Dr. Shields, do you want to share?
Do you want to share?
Katie, you want to share?
Do you want me to share?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did ask the question of Dr. Bear, and the recommendation was elected by the students.
I agree with Dr. Bear.
I'm going to go ahead and defer to Dr. Bear on that then. Okay.
All right, student body.
Okay, so we're through one question. Student body election. Okay. Do we want an alternate person? So we can just raise your hand, yes or no?
Does the
Yes.
alternate only serve if the person steps down, or does it
I think it would be
serve for
if
any
they can't,
meeting?
if they can't attend or if they step down, correct? That's my
Correct.
understanding.
Or we could arrange it such that an alternate, they can go every other, if we want to structure it that way. That comes later on in
We
our
can even do
question.
more,
We
but
can,
we'll get
yes.
to that yeah. Okay, so the answer is yes for an alternate. Okay. Actually, I didn't look this way. Okay, how many, I actually didn't look this way. Okay, good, okay. So now we have to talk about the process, timeline, so it's gonna be a little bit different. So this, basically, I don't think we need to answer this question because now it's gonna be an election, so it'd have to be coordinated at the high school. Yeah, so the high school would coordinate the election then. You're good with that, Ms. Bear? Okay, Dr. Bear. And then we will have to announce them at the June 17th meeting and swear in at REARC. Okay, so that's good. Okay, so none of this matters. Training, do we want to provide training?
Yes.
It's not, yes, okay. So attendance, do we want them to, so here's some ideas.
Wait, do we want to, you skipped the application.
Because no,
entirely.
because
Okay. Okay.
there isn't one. So there isn't an application now.
Well, I think there should be some qualifications that are put out there.
Couldn't the policy committee
So
address
the-
that?
So if we want the policy committee to address it, but I do think that there should be something that we should say is important. Again, this is a challenging position for a student.
For sure.
This is going to be someone who sits in a meeting while we discuss a lot of things that they don't really understand or know. And we actually heard today from students who said, I went to a board meeting, I had no idea what you were talking about. So again,
Applying.
but maybe they would.
surprised.
You would be surprised. Again, I think that whatever we do, we should make sure that very proactively, that the student applying understands what the responsibilities are, and that we could suggest certain qualification minimums. Personally, I don't need a 4.0 student. I am okay if you maintain a 3.0 personally. Like
So you're saying that even though it's an
things like
election,
this.
you're saying is that even though there's an election, there would be qualifications to be able to
I
be in
think
the
there
election?
should be qualifications. I'm just voicing that as my opinion. I could be wrong and in the minority.
I'm with you, but I think if the students are picking them, then it's not.
So can I
But-
just,
Yeah.
I disagree. I don't think we should put qualifications because, again, it's being chosen. What I do believe we should put is a job description, right? And that's on us to do the job description so that whoever is applying or whoever's going to run for the job, just the way we all ran for the job, we should know what we're getting into. And so the job description really, again, in my mind, go onto the board webpage, and if you go onto our page, we talk about what our job is. And that's the job of the student representative. It has not been dictated, or at least by the legislature, that it's going to be a different job. So that really, in my mind, you take that description, that is now the qualification. We certainly don't have GPA requirements for any one of us, because,
We have an age requirement, we have other requirements.
right, but that's gone out the window with the students.
I think that the following questions, though, will kind of lead back to some of those, right? I think that the.
Certainly in the minority, we don't have to belabor this. This is not something we have to belabor. Please continue. I
Okay.
voiced my
No,
voice, I made my
you're
point
totally entitled
clear,
to that,
and so
yeah.
now let's continue moving forward.
Well, I think that it's I think that we might come back to that after this, because now, for example, let's talk about attendance, because we are gonna have to set what the attendance looks like, and the students will have to be able to commit to that. So for example, are we gonna ask them to attend meetings over the summer?
I think it should be the same rule for every board member. You cannot miss 3
But remember,
consecutive
they're ex
meetings.
officio, though.
I mean, again,
Well, let's start with the summer, like,
Well,
are we expecting these
I think it said they're not
students?
expected. I thought I read in the sample policy or somewhere that they're not expected to attend over
We
the
can
summer.
write
no,
it
but
that
we
way
can.
itself.
I'm asking us what we want.
This would mean that they couldn't go to summer camp.
I agree with you.
right?
So I say no, they shouldn't come in the summer.
I say no.
That's the
I
question.
say
Just in
they are
case
not
we're taking
required to be
So,
here over the summer.
now,
Do we need to vote on that?
Next.
We all agree with the no.
I don't require it to come to the.
You're
Right,
not.
okay. Now to Emily's point. 3 meetings with 3 meetings without approved excuse. If they miss 3 meetings, once they've missed 3 meetings, they would be excused from the position. That's a proposal.
Well, that's hard to do if we have an
Without
alternate.
approved excuse.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Must they attend in person? Or
Yes.
can they live stream?
In person.
I'm asking
Yeah.
a question.
I think there's language in there that they can like attend remotely with
student.
permission, isn't there?
But remember, we can't attend remotely because we didn't do the resolution.
have the
So, and we don't have the
technology
technology set up for it.
They're not part of all of those
Right.
requirements.
All right,
I still think that that's,
They
Okay,
can't
let's
even vote.
Let's worry about that at the
just-
policy side of this, if you guys want to dig into that.
Sure.
Okay. Because, okay, we can. Okay, because we don't even, so guys, if it's okay for them to attend remotely, are we okay with them attending remotely if the law allows that? No. I'm a no. I think that having people remotely very badly negatively impacts the flow of meetings. I'm against any of us attending remotely. I think if you can't come, you're not present. So I would say that that's the same for the student.
But, okay, so let me ask this question. Is the student just listening? Because the student can't be part of deliberations, the student can't vote.
Right.
Student's not coming into exec. So is the student participating? This is what I'm,
so our budget
We're gonna get to
conversation.
that.
So our,
That's a later question, but.
okay.
because
we're
if they're
gonna get to that.
participating, then the remote aspect makes it more difficult, right?
Correct.
So that's maybe,
So let's table the remote for a second. Does everyone agree with 3 meetings per what Ms. Epstein or Ms. Bays had proposed? I agree with that.
without excuse, maybe?
Correct. 3 meetings without excuse, with 3 meetings, 3 total. We only have 9 meetings that are during the school year. So I think if you miss 3 meetings, you're not the right fit. If you miss 3 meetings, you're not the right person for the job.
Before we answer the 3 meetings, the total meeting?
total, it's
Okay.
consecutive.
Okay, 3 consecutive, whatever is consistent with our requirements.
I'll ask my
We'll
question
double check.
later. It's a separate question than amounts.
Okay. So is everyone okay with the 3, whether it's total or consecutive, to be in line with the policy that applies for trustees?
Yeah, yes, and it's without a reason, right?
Correct.
Like,
Without
we're
a
treating them like
valid
students,
reason.
they have a reason. So I think it
Obviously.
could just be 3, right?
Yeah.
And if they have a reason, they have a reason. We're going
Right.
to cut them slack, but I think a student would need to be there consistently to be part of the flow of things.
Correct.
But I know you're going to have a later question for us about the role of the alternate too, which
Correct.
may throw some of this into
Exactly.
question.
Okay. Next is,
Wait, did we do going past a certain hour? I'm sorry.
that's the next one. So now, meetings often go late. I think that we should have an excusal time. Maybe it's 9 o'clock. Some of you with high school kids might know the better time, where once we hit that hour, the student would be able to leave and it wouldn't be counted as, we would say, it's now X o'clock, you're welcome to leave or you're welcome to stay. Does everyone have a time that they think would be the appropriate? Those of you with high school kids can
Well-
answer that better than me.
There's the other side of it, which is if there happens to be a student who's involved in sports, can't get here until, I mean.
I think the student shouldn't apply if they can't do the job. That's the truth.
And therefore should be able to stay late. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to be like but I think the person who's going to want to be on the board is going to want to be on the board. And
Right.
that'll be their activity. And students stay way up past 9 PM, trust me.
Okay. I just don't want us to be in a situation where we have a meeting that goes late and we have trustees saying, oh, we have to end the meeting because so-and-so has to go home. That's what I'd like to avoid us being set up for.
So my feeling is that when you look at what the student can participate in, realistically, past discussion, the student has no participation, because after that, we're consent agenda, and we're voting on policies and things of that nature. So is it worthwhile to have a student stay during that time period if they are really unable to effectively participate? They literally are just sitting here. So you could do it where it's set at a time frame. I'm okay saying they can go leave by a certain time, but if you really look at how our meetings are run, maybe framing it that, once there really is no longer a point where they're going to be able to participate, we can allow them the option, if they so desire, to leave. They can stay if they so desire, but again, I'm just looking at, it's kind of boring to sit here if you can't participate in the meeting for the next 2 hours while we have consent agenda discussions.
And I guess the question is, what really is the legislature's reason for having an ex officio student board member? Because there's a lot of meat in a consent agenda, even if we don't discuss it. That's the real business. So I'm all for letting the student go home earlier, but what is the purpose? Because that may drive
So
why this,
I think if
how
you
late the
look at
student should stay.
sorry to interrupt you, but
That's okay.
if you look at the NISBA sample policy, they say specifically, the ex officio student members of the board are expected to bring a student perspective to the board's discussions, bring student concerns to the board's attention, represent the student body on the board. That's, I think, the big question mark of what does that mean? Report back to the student body on the board's actions, and lastly, solicit input from students on matters impacting the district and the direction of the board.
So I guess they can read the consent agenda, don't have to be here when we vote on it, and then
But don't
report
know,
on it.
but if they're not here, then they don't know how we voted on it, or if there was a,
They'll have to
listen, I think
not
the
wrong.
student should be here for the, just like
I'll just
any
put my
board
vote.
member who has to leave can leave. I think if they had to leave,
Right.
they would say, I've got to go, like, Sue and I will be saying.
So you think we should just be silent on it in the policy?
Yeah.
I disagree. I think that there's going to be superstars that are going to try to please us, please the public, please the student body that voted for them. I'm putting a 2-hour max on any need for them to be on beyond 2 hours, because we sometimes move to meeting time, so I don't think it should be like a 9 p.m., 10 p.m. number. I just think it should be 2 hours max, because if we have a daytime Friday meeting, well, they won't even make it. So I'm okay. I would like to see a 9 p.m. or a 9:30 cap. It is right now 9:06, and we still are on discussion items. with the concept of consent agenda and also new business, old business, I do feel that the flexibility, and this can maybe be brought up by policy, is that if there is a cap on time and that student would like to bring up new business, then the change of order, I think, should be allowed on the agenda for that day, for it to be before consent agenda, so that they can be part of bringing up new business or old
I'm not
business.
sure if they could do that.
I brought this up today, that I thought maybe they could still bring up new, because what the description you just gave says bring up student concerns.
But we can design as a board that we want to have that in a specific way, like we could have
Yeah.
them.
We
you know
could
how
add
have
it
the
to our
stu-
discussion.
Like the
Yeah,
students who
so-
speak at the beginning, we
Yeah.
might want to just have them, we might want that to just be our first item after superintendent report, like our student board member report.
And,
Just an
and
idea.
just to, I mean, I'm sure Administrator would know this, but there are limits on athletes with times. So for me, I would say the 9 or 9:30 time cap, 2 hours. Because if we start at 7:30, they're not going to be here during executive. So that's a 7:30 to 9:30 is 2 hours.
Unless we start at 8 or 8:30.
I would do the 9 or 9:30 then. I wouldn't go past.
Who
So
would like to see it?
reading-
Can I just get a whole show of hands? Who wants to see a time limit? Like, just so I know if we're having.
Can I
This
go
isn't a
into,
vote, I just want to
this is a sample,
Go
in
ahead.
the sample, it says ex officio student members may request to participate in meetings remotely and may be excused to leave meetings early upon the approval of the board president.
Right.
So that reads to me like we can just treat it flexibly. And the other thing about if there's issues with consent or issues with old business that they know is coming or new business, we can arrange for those kinds of things to be addressed before the student either A, wants to, or B, needs to leave.
That's totally fine. The only reason I'm asking is because this is all in the policy, right? But it's all the sample policy, so I wanted to get a sense of what our entire board wanted before sending it back to policy. So I agree, the sample policy has that flexibility, but it's also, if it doesn't say in our policy, the student is not expected to stay past 9:30, they might be sheepish about asking the board president for an exception, or we can do it either way. We can leave it flexible, but I kind of agree to Ms. Alvarez's point that we don't want them to feel pressured that they're expected to stay past 9:30 and that it's a permission kind of thing to leave early, because what if, I assume that their teachers are not going to give them midterms the next day because they're, right? There's just so many things going on that I just wouldn't want to be in a situation where a student feels that they have to.
It helps them plan their schedule too. It's just realistic.
I'm okay with the time.
Yeah.
I'm okay with the time.
Okay, so policy, okay, so we're going to have a time.
I'm okay with either.
We're going to have a time.
We're going to have a time too. We're all going
Yeah.
to with the student.
9:30?
9:30.
Okay.
Whatever, yes.
Okay. Next, resignation.
But they can stay longer if they want to.
If they want to,
If they're
anytime.
having fun, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Should they be allowed to, I mean, obviously, we can't force them not to, but should we discuss resignation in the policy? Yes. Okay. Anyone disagree? And then they would just, they can. Okay.
Yes.
Is there a notice provision? Can resign within, 30 days written notice or 15 days written notice?
Well,
Or
I think the policy committee should
Okay.
take that up.
Just a quick question, sorry, to go back to. With the time restriction, the 9:30, Dr. Shields, is there a restriction on athletics and extracurricular activities at what the hour of the day of?
No, there isn't.
You don't have students in
Because I noticed that
Our
the
drama club, I'm
restriction
sure our
of
drama club was
staying
here quite
afterward.
late.
drama and track and cross-country and all that
Okay,
stuff.
welcome to stay with us until 1 AM. Sounds good, thank you.
Bring a blanket.
Okay. Now, I think the real question is, how do we as a board want to incorporate the student voice into our meetings? How are we going to make this a worthwhile experience for both the board, the student, and the student body? What do we want this to look like?
I think we should have a moment for a student, a report from that board member. I know maybe we're not going to do the other thing now of the.
Right.
We are not. So,
Right, so they would give a report after the superintendent.
right. I think they should have a report, and then according to this, they're supposed to be an active part of whatever discussion items we have as well.
Yeah. And then that's kind of where we would end it effectively, is the discussion items, because that's going to be about 9:30.
That's all they're going to be
Yeah.
here for, yeah.
I'd also say that sometimes there's no reports, like, with the assistant superintendents, they're just like, there's no update. So I think it should be fair that the student doesn't have to give an update
Right, it's their
either.
time if they want
Yeah.
to. Okay. So effectively, so just to reiterate this, the student will have an opportunity to give a report, if they so choose, bring us feedback. That would be their time to bring back things that they've heard, asks from the student body, feedback on anything that we're working on. Then we'll go into our discussion items. They'll be able to ask questions or give opinions just like a board member would. Obviously, they won't be able to vote. And then that would really continue throughout whatever items they stay for. But theoretically, usually we're already at 9:30 by the time, like as of now, it's 9:10 and we're probably first getting to committee reports. So everyone is, okay?
Can I read this paragraph? Because
You
it
can.
answers a lot of questions. The ex officio student member represents the student body and acts as an example of for the students of the district. Such students are expected to abide by all applicable board policies, including the student code of conduct. Violations may result in removal from the position as determined by the board. Ex officio student members may resign in writing to the district clerk. The board may also declare the seat vacant if the ex officio student member fails to attend 3 consecutive board meetings without
Well,
sufficient excuse.
that's where these questions came from. We just wanted to make sure the board gave the input on what the board's expectation was. Okay, so you guys know how to follow up on editing that policy to the Port Washington spec, so to
Yep,
speak.
and we'll put it on the April agenda.
Perfect.
Yes?
Yep.
So I'm going to throw a fly in the ointment, and if I'm the only one, then the conversation will stop. I don't know that we even have, to answer this question, but to make it worthwhile, we have student reports that come to us now, and we sit there and we listen, we smile and we nod.
Right.
I personally, if we're going to go through all of this, don't want to sit there and smile and nod. I would love for it to be a worthwhile presentation, or a worthwhile report for the students. So I do appreciate that if there's no report, there's no report. Or if there's a report and they say, I need 2 meetings to gather data, talk to students, find out something. But I would hope that students are bringing to us things that they would want the board to consider, right? So that it is a worthwhile use of our time and their time and the taxpayer time, right? Because we do have staff sitting here. So again, I'm bringing this up as just a point of thought. You can't write this in the policy. Just something to consider as we're operating next year and trying to bring these people forward.
But I think that goes without saying that to the extent that everyone is here, I don't think it's smiling and nodding. I think that everybody's going to absorb what they're saying and they're going to be part of the discussion. And, you know, I've been at many meetings where a trustee says, oh, this community member said this at the podium, we should be thinking about this way. I would think it would be exactly the same with the student board member, but I don't know that there's gonna be like a methodology for how we would do that.
Possibly. This is a growing experience and we can
Yeah.
think about it. I'm just saying it out loud for all of us to consider because we have some capabilities and if this is part of their civic duty and civic responsibility, it should be something where they feel like they're an active participant, especially if they go out and they do the work. If they're talking to their student body members and collecting data and gathering information, I'd love for us to, really entertain it to the level that we can or should in that regard.
Ms. Brooks?
I think part of this will come down to training because many times, and maybe the content of the student report will change, but many times when I'm hearing the student report, I'm hearing building level things that the board has really no purview, over which the board has no purview, but it's something that's happening within the building that can be changed, corrected, instituted, whatever, at the building level. And I think this will come down to training because there will be things that this student representative will bring to us over which we have no power, no control directly anyway. So I think that's a work in progress.
Yeah. Ms. Gilliard, Ms. Malconey, then we'll move on.
I think that what I'm hearing Julie saying is almost like we want to add to the list that they can propose issues for new business. Because I think I don't know if that's the mechanism, but I think what I'm hearing Julie saying is like, let's make it that there is an explicit mechanism that this person doesn't think that they're here to just give a report and we smile and nod and move on, but that they could instead escalate things to the board and make suggestions for things that the board should look at or discuss or address or ask of the administration. And that makes sense to me.
To be fair, when we started the student voice, we did discuss as a board that this was the beginning stages of an experience that we planned to analyze and look at and decide if it was a good model, a bad model, something we could tweak, something we could improve. So that hasn't happened. And now it won't happen because we're moved on to this anyway. But the intent, I'm pushing back on the smile and nod because that wasn't the point. And this board didn't get to the point where we felt like it was, we could make proper changes so that
Because the law
it was
proposed,
effective.
we knew the law was happening almost immediately after we instituted it. So we kind of pumped the brakes, knowing that it was going to be.
I'm just not liking the sentiment that's being shared, that it was just,
I certainly did not.
It was performative because that wasn't the purpose.
You are exactly right, and I did not mean to intimate that it was performative. I think we also felt that we were restricted in how much we could and couldn't do, because we were still learning how to navigate the system, and as Adam said, we knew the law was coming, it was being developed, so we were kind of working through the process.
We
So,
were ahead of the curve again.
well, not really, we're kind of,
Yeah.
other people have elected board members on there. So.
Okay, we were still ahead of the law.
Okay. All right.
Just to be clear, I don't think any of us were denigrating the reports. I actually would love to have it be in the policy that the report from the student board member is a requirement, or at least a very, very strong suggestion, right? Because I think that we filled an entire year of them, and there was interesting information in all of them that was helpful for us to have. So I'm confident that whoever it is could come up with probably something to share with us at every single one.
I'm sorry, Adam, you told me not to talk, but I'm going to. I disagree. You said send it to policy. I like full board stuff also. I disagree. Not all trustees always have questions whenever there's a discussion item. So if a student doesn't want to talk, I feel like that should be their right, that they don't want to give a discussion item or report that day. So the expectation, listen, we're all parents, right? So I think we all have high expectations for this position and this student that's going to be here, but we're going to get who we get, and it's just what we have to deal with, and same how we deal with each other.
If we appointed the person.
Say again?
If we appointed the person, we wouldn't get who we get.
But I just disagree that there should be any, like, you must, because some of we have 2 in a month, so I just don't think it should be a requirement.
Yeah, okay, good. So I think, Ms. Brooks, you are able to take this back. You understood all of this, and you can check the YouTube.
I'm going to write up all my notes,
Okay.
circulate with the board, just to make
Perfect.
sure that the policy committee is going in the right direction.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do we need to discuss further the alternate issue and what that actually means, or do we want to let policy just take
Why
it
don't
from
you let
here?
policy, why don't you let policy do that, especially because we're doing, since we're doing an election, it really is like a main trustee and probably an alternate versus versus other scenarios where we could even have picked 5 of them and had them alternate and rotated. That's what's kind of changed. Yeah.
I mean, I think an election could be any number that we want it to be.
Right,
Right?
yeah,
So I'm fine with policy discussing it, but I think they should keep that in mind.
right, because that's another model that
what
we're
makes
allowed to do
sense.
is have multiple ones who would rotate through instead of having one. So you could have even 3 or 5 or 10. Okay. So, moving on.
Oh, we didn't tell the grade.
Which one?
Does it matter, grade?
Oh, you're right, I totally did skip that. Grade, did you guys have a feeling about grade 10 through 12, 11, 10 through, no?
I mean, I think the law says they have to have completed a year of high school,
Yeah, so
right?
it's 10 through 12.
So it's 10 through 12.
10 through 12 is the broadest parameter,
I think it's fine.
okay?
I will add feedback from our student roundtable. Many thought it should be a senior because they've experienced all 4 years, parking, driving, blah, blah, blah. There was a couple that felt that it should be a junior. So I'm just giving that
So
feedback
if it's an
there.
election though, then they'll be able to express that.
But if it's an election, we could say it's only within the senior class. You're only electing
no.
a senior.
What I'm saying, if we were basing it on what the students want, they'll be able to express that in their vote.
Okay.
You know what I mean? If they want it to be that's what
I wasn't going to bring this up, but I just have a question. And I'm throwing a curveball. So today's curriculum did the senior experience. Safe to say there is no way that this could meet your senior experience requirement. Well, because it's just like a position, so I didn't know.
It's a government, they take a government course that's in senior experience, so maybe.
I imagine we'd have to ask the high school.
The high school is nodding yes. Yes.
So for me, I'm leaning towards senior and allowing this to be part of their senior experience.
I think 10 through 12 and let the students.
Yeah, one person, I'm just saying, senior with senior experience.
Okay, let's just take a vote. Who would like to see it be 10 through 12? Can we just,
I would like to know if our administration had an opinion on that, too.
They
want it to be a
senior.
they want it to be a senior?
They want it to be a senior. They want it to be a senior.
Okay, can we just, I'm just gonna take a quick poll. I'll just go through all the choices. Who wants 10 through 12?
It's going to be a senior. Everyone's going to say.
Who wants junior? Or who wants 11 and 12? Who wants 12? Okay, 12, simple. Let's move on. Okay. All right, anyone else? We're good? Okay. Okay. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to approve minutes for the February 7th, 25 Policy and Personnel Committee meeting, February 10th, 25 Budget and Facilities, and February 11th, 25 BOE meeting. Is there a second? Ms. Epstein. Everyone was raising their hand, I couldn't decide. All in favor, 7-0. Okay, moving on to committee reports. Yeah, Policy and Personnel, Ms. Brooks, because Ms. Bays does not have an update today, other than their next meeting is March 17th, 2025, at 9 a.m. at the Camp
It's Irish
Annex.
soda bread.
Yeah.
It's Irish soda bread.
Okay, there will be no Irish soda bread at the Policy and Personnel Committee meeting, however, we promise lots of other good stuff, like
what?
policy. You will see a lot on today's agenda. It's separated into 3 sections, the adoption section, the first read section, and for something new and exciting, a section of rescission. We have plowed through finally all of the special education series, yes, the 4-3-2-1 series, and there were 3 Port Washington policies that were kind of left over as superfluous, redundant, after reworking the existing policies, bringing in the new NISPA policies, renumbering, and with advice of the superintendent, but based on the recommendation of Dr. Allen and council, the policies on for rescission have been deemed redundant, unnecessary, incorporated into other policies. In other words, we can feel safe taking them off the books. So that's why there's so much more on today's agenda. And once we finish this whole section, we will really begin to make sure our titles and our numbers align with the NISPA numbers. We'll make sure that the obsolete Port Washington policies are removed from the website so there's no confusion, and make sure that we're all set there. And our next meeting will be April 4th. We already know that one item on the agenda is going to be the ex officio student BOE member.
Great, wonderful. Audit Committee next meeting is April 9th at 9 a.m. Curriculum just met today. Do you want to give an update?
I do. We had an amazing conversation about the senior experience and how our students are really treated as interns with wonderful, very individualized experiences. It will be up on the website. I encourage the community to take a look. It's a really wonderful program, and we're very happy to have it here. And our next meeting will be Friday, April 25th at 10 a.m., and we will be discussing the grading policy recommendations from PGCD from Dr. Shields' office.
Wonderful, thank you. We're now at the consent agenda portion of our agenda. Is there anything that anyone needs to pull at this time? Wonderful. I'm making a motion to approve items 13.1.1 through 13.6.2a. Do I have a second? Ms. Alvarez can vote, and we are 6-0. Moving ahead, we are now going to our policy section. As Ms. Brooks outlined, I have a motion to adopt the following policies. I'm assuming it's policy 4321.1-N, provision of special education services in the least restrictive environment. Policy 4321.2-N, school-wide pre-referral approaches and interventions. Policy 4321.3-N, allocation of space for special education programs and students. Policy 4321.5-N, confidentiality and access to individualized educated programs, individualized education service programs, and service plans. Policy 4772, high school graduation ceremony. Policy 5710, school safety and educational climate reporting. And lastly, policy 9520.6, the right of employees to express breast milk in the workplace. Before I did do a motion, but did anyone need to pull any of those? No? Do I have a second for that? Ms. Brooks, all in favor? All in favor, Ms. Melkonian, are you? 7-0, wonderful. I will turn this over to, okay, but we have for the first reading with the recommendation of the superintendent, policy 4321.4-N, independent educational evaluations, policy 4321.9-N, declassification of students with disabilities, and policy 4321.12, timeout and physical restraint all students. Would anyone like to discuss any aspects of those policies at this point?
Having seen nobody, I just want to mention that the declassification policy and the timeout, we put red line versions up, and also added the timeout and physical restraint new regulation with red line versions. And for the people who weren't at the policy meetings, there was a lot of synthesis and desynthesis and reconstruction, deconstruction between the timeout and physical restraint policy and the regulation done by Dr. Allen and the attorneys. And so we left all that slicing and dicing in there so that people can see what was changed. But I'm asking that when we put it on for adoption, do we still want the red line, or can we make it legible?
Yeah, take out the red line.
Okay, I'm just making sure, thank you.
The red lines.
Yes, I appreciate it for first reading also, thank you. And last but not least, I do believe we should take a motion for rescinded policies since we are physically removing them. So making a motion to rescind the following policies: 4321.3, maintaining a census of pupils with disabilities. Policy 4321.5, placement of students with disabilities. And policy 4321.7, individuals with disabilities pursuant to section 501 and including the regulation for that policy, individuals with disabilities pursuant to Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Do I have a second?
I have a question.
Go ahead. Yes?
So I thought this was we were waiting for attorney okay,
And we got that go ahead.
okay. I have no questions.
Do you want to be the second? Ms. Alvarez will be the second for that motion. And do we have a vote? Ms. Gilliard, okay, 7-0. Thank you very much. Now I turn it over to President Smith.
Thank you very much, and I am very happy that I didn't have to read all of those policy names. Thank you very much.
My NPR voice.
I loved your NPR voice. Okay, moving on to old business. So as is our custom, we address questions and comments when appropriate from previous community discussions. At our last meeting, a student from the high school compact committee raised the question regarding a potential classroom ban on cell phones and inquired about the board's level of consideration for a formal policy. And we did feel it was important to provide a response. As the board is, and I believe some of the community may be aware, the governor has included legislation in the state budget proposal regarding internet-based devices in schools. This proposal goes beyond cell phones and introduces a bell-to-bell distraction-free model, restricting the use of all internet-based devices during instructional time. However, an exception is made for school-issued devices and only when used for instructional purposes. At this time, the legislation has not yet been adopted. However, it appears very likely to move forward. In fact, the governor spoke today on this topic with a dedicated press conference. So it's very likely that this bell-to-belt ban is going to pass. In anticipation of this, we are requesting that the administration begin reviewing the potential impact of the legislation, and I believe you've already started this, correct? Including how the district will comply with the outlined parameters and whether there are, this is the important one, and whether there are any budgetary considerations for implementation. And if so, hopefully we would be able to discuss that, maybe even at the next budget meeting. I know that's tight, but if anyone disagrees on the board, I'd love to see that. Okay. Great. Any other old business anyone can think of? Nope. Okay. So with that, we're going to move to new business. Yeah, go ahead. Do you want to do that under old or new? Okay. Miss Melconi wanted to bring up some old business items.
In October, I had asked about two things in old business then, so I seem to keep bringing these together. There's no connection whatsoever. But in October, I had asked Dr. Hines for an update on the work that was potentially being done with converting our policies to PDFs that could be translated on our website. And he asked that he look into that and get back. He said he needed time to look into it to get back to us. And so now I'm coming to you with that same question.
Okay, I will look into it, and I will make sure I get back to you in a very timely way.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and my second, this was something that I brought up also in that October meeting, and I wanted to revisit because I thought that there was some consensus on the board at the time, and I wanted an update on that as well. We had talked about the benefits of and the value in providing voter information for our incoming families, either as new residents or as kindergarten registrants, and whether or not we were going to add information to our board website or into packets for any onboarding experiences that we might have. For example, families that move from out of state who may not be aware of voting regulations for school board members and for school budgets. Or families that come out of New York City who also have different practices, and that as a way of engaging our voting community in our budget process, that I thought the consensus was that we would look into providing some information. So did we have an update on that?
Can I ask a question? Sorry, just to clarify. I remember somewhat the conversation, but just to clarify, are we talking about the voter registration process as it pertains to, I mean, you have to register to vote to do this, but because of school boards and the budget vote, or in general, like you want just general?
There's only one voter registration.
Yeah, so we're just, you, no, but
What do you mean there's two?
on the website, there's like info on who can be a trustee and all that information. So are we just talking about the voter registration form itself, or more information than that?
More information in terms of, for example, as I mentioned, there are families that move in either from out of state or from New York City that are not aware that there's an actual budget vote that occurs here. That's not something we do as voters when we register and vote in November. So that's, I was looking for, I thought the consensus was that there was benefits to informing our community.
So I'm sorry, I remember the conversation, but I think what we were discussing at the time, or at least what I remember, is that that was really more parent council. That is exactly what parent council does. When it comes to kindergarten registration, they actually go and do the kindergarten orientations and explain, you now vote. I mean, we've gone to preschools as parent council and explain what the thing. So I think what we then said is that we would definitely have a concerted effort on our web page, on the board page, and I haven't looked to see, but I think it's a great way to just add, like, how do I vote on a school budget? What is a school budget? That might be something that we could work on our page. I don't know if we put it, but a lot of the work that you're referring to has always been done by parent council. And I think I remember saying that I think it's best that the board kind of stay out of that part of, keep it in that way, because we don't want to be seen as violating the law in saying, you must vote yes. Like,
Well, I
remember, it's
think
kind of a tricky.
It can be tricky, and I
Yeah.
agree with you, but I think we have counsel that we can seek guidance from on what the parameters could and should be, so
What's on
that
our
we can
website?
inform the public.
Yeah, I remember it being more of an onboarding discussion. So in the materials that are given to somebody who moves in or has been here and is now registering their child for school, whether it's preschool or wherever it is, that we simply say, there are school board elections and a budget vote every year. Here is how to register to vote, or transfer your registration. That's it. It's not, right? It's just
That's on our
something very
website.
simple.
So we do have it on our website now.
But we were talking
Yeah.
more about incorporating it into an onboarding new parent in the district for whatever reason kind of packet.
As a new parent in the district mid-year, there is no such thing as onboarding. So just to clarify, the only information you get is from the website. So if you miss open house in September or whatever, there is no other packet of information. So for me, I'm not opposed to like the onboarding and it being part of onboarding, but there's no such thing for like mid-year minus the open houses of like information on who the HSA PTs are, who's parents council. So like a physical thing that you're looking for, I don't believe actually exists. So and any administrator or central office can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's nothing like physically given. So I think the website has been the consistent place of all communication for any new parent with a kindergarten kid, pre-K kid, mid-year, whatever it is, that you go to the website. I'm not saying that's the way it should be. I'm just saying like there's no other thing for us to discuss of like a place to put it.
So we had an onboarding committee a couple of years back, and I thought we were looking at practices that were beyond kindergarten orientation or kindergarten registration.
We were, and that was on, before Mike left, that was on his list of priorities that needed to be finished this year. So I don't know to what extent that's continued, but.
Yeah, we're going to continue to look
Yeah.
into that. That has not fallen off the radar.
Okay, so then I guess I'm going to go back to the board and say, are we interested in voter information being provided in an onboarding packet, if I'm using just a general word, or in registration packets, kindergarten registration
I'll
packets?
say what I said last time, which is I don't feel very comfortable with voter registration necessarily, other than what we already have where if people go to look for it, it's there. But I would be comfortable with a letter, whether it's from the superintendent or the board, just outlining how a school budget process, what a trustee is, what a school budget is, and how they get approved and voted on, and that you could go and look to register to vote to get that information. I would be comfortable at that level, but I wouldn't want to go past that in an onboarding.
Maybe I'm not being clear, that's
Yeah.
kind of what I had in my mind, was just offering the information and then, sending to a link on our website or however you think that it should be
Yeah.
done.
But I think that like explaining what we do and what the school budget is, what I call context, is something that oftentimes has always been lacking, is like, what is the school budget? What is a trustee? When you move in, you see signs, but you don't know what that is. So I'm never against providing context.
So
But, yeah.
I guess, does our budget brochure go out too late that you wouldn't just put something in that? That goes to the entire community. It outlines our budget. It talks about things. It maybe misses the registration deadline, but if we are active enough, we may be able to publish our document soon enough. But,
The card goes out.
oh, that's right, the card goes out
But the
beforehand.
card doesn't really talk about what is this.
Correct, but our budget brochure does talk about all of those things. So the only thing that is potentially missing is the registration aspect, but I agree with Ms. Bays that I know parent council, our HSAs, our PTAs are out there making sure that this information is getting pushed for registration at a time when registration is on your mind. I think when people are registering their children for school, and I might be wrong, but the last thing on their mind is the budget vote. And the first thing on their mind is, I've got to get my child into this school, and I have to get them set up, and I want to meet their teachers, and I want to do all of these things. And I think it could fall through the cracks at that point, hitting them at the time when this is when you should register, these are the things you should be doing. That's the most effective. And if we want to incorporate more into our budget brochure, which is the time we talk about trustees and the time we talk about the budget, that seems worthwhile to me. But we do a lot of that already in the budget brochure. We could just make it clearer if people want.
I'll just say, without seeing whatever this future packet looks like, I can't give opinion yet. So until the administration works on presenting what the onboarding looks like, I really can't give.
Onboarding was for our students to come into the school. That was the priority of the goal when it was originally established. It did. For the families, right? It wasn't, the voter part of it is now a new aspect that's added as a tickler. So yes, none of us know what the onboarding is, but I don't want the onboarding package to be derailed because of the voting conversation.
Well, I'll make it even more of a hiccup. There are other districts that give a very detailed packet for their onboarding with a lot more information than just your so which gives your everything, your community resources, gives your PTs, HSAs. So if Port Washington District's onboarding packet looks like that, and it's very resourceful, then I'm not opposed to adding more information with what Ms. Melkonian's looking for. If it's not, if it's literally, here's your principal, here's your teachers, here's the paper, then I can see where it looks a little bizarre. Like, here's like these two pieces of paper. Oh, by the way, here's what a trustee and budget looks like. So until I see the full packet, then I'm of the opinion to include more information. I find it bizarre to add.
So we keep this on the tickler, kind of pending what the onboarding packet looks like, so that's not a completed item.
Right.
We'll make sure that
That's what it sounds like to me. I just want to, I'm sorry, I just want to warn my fellow board members, just to be careful, because we cannot proceed as nations, we are a community, and so we just, again, that's why I'm kind of being a little back on this. I know you can make a face, but I'm just saying, we're already accused of not being transparent. There's my favorite word. I don't want us to be accused of anything else.
Well, as I said, we pay for counsel, and this would be a question.
Okay.
I just think making sure people have the information to know that they get to vote on something should not be controversial at all, and definitely doesn't stretch. Well,
Right.
absolutely. I don't think there's a legal issue there, but absolutely. The point is the parents are coming in who are new, right? And so they don't know, but I would be in
They may not
favor
be
of making
parents.
sure
They
we
may not
have
be parents
something.
that are coming in, right? They could be seniors that are moving in. They could be a couple with no children. All I'm saying is that I agree 100% that information should be available to all potential voters. But we should not be targeting a specific group. That's all I'm saying.
So
Can
just
we
to be
ask
clear,
counsel?
though, I don't think we are targeting a specific group here. But I don't think that was the intent of the suggestion, right? The intent of the suggestion
guys,
was
we
to
already-
make
we
sure
already
people get
agreed-
informed.
We already agreed we're going to put a pin in this, so I don't think there's any point in arguing about it. But that being said, when we develop the budget brochure, I think we can all agree that making sure that there's somewhere in somebody's letter, whether it's yours or the board's, that it's clear as to if you want to vote for the budget, this is where you should look for the resources to register.
I mean, I think we
Maybe
could also
right.
make sure the information's on our website.
It is already on our website. Everything's already there in a big
It's on the
banner.
page now.
I would also just like to add, and thanks to our PC, or to our Parents Council and all of our HSAs and PTAs who really do push out there to
Every day.
get that. And no, it goes to community members because their parent council thing goes out to parents, it goes out to community members. You do not have to be a parent to subscribe to the parent council unless I'm
And that's
incorrect
them
about
doing
it.
it, not us.
And that's them doing it, not us. So I just, again, we do have resources that are doing it. I know Ms. Melconian would like to expand those resources, and I understand that, but I don't want to begrudge the ones that are already doing
I
the
think we have
work.
some pathways to doing that, so we're deciding on this.
I'm
Okay.
not begrudging the work that's being done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, let's move on. Let's move on, guys. So we know what we're doing. Okay, moving on to new business. So at this time, we need to make some nominations for the Nassau BOCES board member. Attached, we've received the resumes of 2 candidates seeking nominations. I'd like to just go ahead and, we typically vote for these nominations, so I'd like to just go ahead and make two resolutions. The first one is item 16.1, resolve that the Port Washington Union Free School District Board of Education nominates Mr. B.A. Schoen for the position of Nassau County BOCES board member for a 3-year term beginning July 1st, 2025. And then 16.2, resolve that the Port Washington Union Free School District Board of Education nominates Fran N. Langster for the position of Nassau County BOCES board member for a 3-year term beginning July 1st, 2025. I'd like to make a motion to approve items 16.1 and 16.2. Is there a second? Ms. Epstein, all in favor?
Before I vote,
6-0.
oh,
No, go ahead, no. Just as a practice, we typically, when people ask for these nominations, we typically make them and then we discuss the candidates when it comes to the voting time. Is that
are these the only 2 candidates that asked for nominations? Were there
what we
other,
received?
are there other candidates and they just did not request a nomination?
They send them to us, typically, it just.
They individually send it to us.
Correct.
I'm just wondering the process, so there's potentially other candidates that just did not send the president an email.
Correct.
And the district clerk, the
typically.
district clerk.
Yeah.
And there's a process that they need to
This
follow.
is very standard, how they all do it.
And there's a deadline and so forth, so.
Yeah.
So we may see
7-0.
more, we may see more at our next
Seven.
March meeting,
So
because it has to
I'm
be
gonna
by the
retake-
end of March.
I'm going to retake the
Yeah.
vote, because it's important technicality. So I'm going to retake the vote. Yeah.
Oh, we're taking the
Of course,
vote.
7-0, because Ms. Alvarez didn't.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And now
Okay, so that's 7-0.
16.2.
I did it 16.1 through 16.2. Yeah, so they're both done. Okay. Does anyone have any other new business to bring up? Nope. Okay. At this time, we're going to move on to our second opportunity for the community to be heard. Reminder, this is our, the rules from earlier are still in effect. I won't read them again. So I have the list. If anyone else signed up, you can let me know at the end, starting with Sue Grazer.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. Sue Grazer, Parent Council Co-President and a former member of the Playground Committee. I am speaking today to ask about the proposed $125,000 reduction in next year's budget for playgrounds, and hoping that in one of the next meetings, you can clarify whether the entire $125,000 will be removed. Additionally, is there an intention at some point to reinstate this funding in the next budget cycle? The Playground Committee initially added this funding to prevent situations where aging playgrounds break down without a clear replacement plan or budget.
Ms. Grazer, I'm going to just interrupt you. This
Yeah.
is a little bit unclear in how it's presented, but that is because we have funding from the state that's making up for it, so it's coming out of our
Okay.
general budget. So I just want to make sure that the money's not gone, it's just coming from a different source.
Great.
So just before you keep going, is that?
Then my question is moot, and I do not need to advocate for that funding.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, just figured I'd save you the next minute and a half. Okay, that was an easy one. Ms. Melwani.
Good evening, Jessica Melwani, Manor Haven and Weber Parent. Thank you for tonight's budget presentation. I certainly feel a lot better tonight than I did coming out of this meeting last year. I have a few specific questions about the budget and the administration's recommendations. First, did the district recoup any of the costs from the Synergy implementation when that contract was terminated? If so, how much? And if not, why not? Same questions for the Stop Finder app, which has not worked for some bus routes since day one, if in fact it represented an additional expense on top of the GPS system we funded 3 budget cycles back. If there are recoup costs, how are they being captured and utilized? Finally, I'm pleased to see the administration prioritizing caseload reductions for our mental health professionals. It's no secret that I have personally advocated for that for a long time, and Weber seems like a good place to start. I'd like to ask if the recommendation for a 5th counselor at Weber came out of ongoing conversations about reimagining middle grade education. If so, does the administration or reimagining committee see any other benefits such a position might create, even beyond more time and connection per student? I'm thinking, for instance, of the fundamental structural flexibility a counselor working across multiple houses could potentially create. More broadly, where do those reimagining conversations stand today? And are there any other findings from them that the community can expect to see reflected in next year's budget priorities? I asked a lot of questions in 2 minutes, so I'll email them to you for accurate record keeping after the meeting. Thank you very much. I look forward to learning more at the next meeting.
Ms. McLean? Sorry.
Hi, Regina McLean. I'm the president of the Port Washington Teachers Association. I represent over 500 dedicated and caring professionals. We're teachers, we're nurses, social workers, guidance counselors. I know I'm missing someone in there. I apologize. I just wanted to say that we are pleased to see the administration is looking to address class size in the upcoming budget, and the school board trustees are in support of this endeavor. The proposed goal of having class size at 1 below the board's max is a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Ms. Tal?
Lauren Toll, Sousa parent. I'm trying to confirm my understanding of what was discussed tonight on the class size topic. By effectively lowering the upper elementary maximum to 25 and effectively lowering the lower elementary maximum to 22, are we doing this to address the outliers so that we have better guardrails to make sure that nobody actually reaches the maximums, rather than targeting these maximums? As an example, if we have a rising 3rd grade cohort who currently averages 21 children in a class in 2nd grade, are we going to allow these children to continue to have a reasonable class size of 21 children in 3rd grade? Or does this mean we will possibly remove a section and target the maximum of 25 for this group and thereby create another outlier, another crowded classroom? Allowing them to start the year at 25 children per class in a district where the average class size across all elementary schools is between 18 and 21 students. My point in asking this is, while many of us appreciate, and I very much appreciate, the intent and the attention now being paid to class size, in a district where the majority of elementary classes, excluding special education classes, averages 18 to 21 students, I don't think having some cohorts remain in crowded classrooms at 25 per class is something we should be satisfied with. I genuinely appreciate the attempt to be transparent on the planning of class sizes. However, we have a lot of work to do as a district to address what seems may be a continued crowded class size issue. Addressing the crowded class size issue will take an even more serious commitment by the district, similar to the commitment made by the district when it decided to create the centralized ICT program at Sousa. It will take that level of commitment to actually solve the crowded class size issue in any real way. And just by clarification, the petition that was delivered to the board that requested the class size maximum be reduced by 2 wasn't intending to relay a message that parents want to see classes of 24 in upper elementary, as an example. It was meant to request a reduction in the allowable maximums so that we don't continue to have outliers each year. For example, using the current 4th grade at Sousa as an example, if the maximum had been 24 instead of 26, another section would have been added, which would have brought the average class size down to 21, which is in line with
30 seconds remaining.
Other reasonable class sizes. The intention would not be to target 25. That would still be considered an outlier. Thank you.
Ms. Pareda.
Hi, Patty Pareda. I'm a Sousa parent.
For years, we've asked for real solutions to class sizes that are too big for our kids and our teachers. Now, for the first time, we're hearing the administration and the board, well, some of the board, acknowledge this issue. That's a great step, but I hope it's not a final solution, so I'm here asking for more information. Hiring 1 to 3 additional teachers is not enough. It's the bare minimum. It still leaves many classes above the optimal range, as Lauren just so eloquently said. We need class sizes that truly support our children's education. That means a meaningful reduction across the district, not just a half measure that checks a box without fixing the problem. I genuinely appreciate that we are finally having this conversation. I appreciate budget concerns. I appreciate competing priorities. But as I see it, this is a first draft, and I would ask you to take it back and try harder.
Hi, I'm Lauren Krieger, SUSA parent. So I am also heartened by the focus on class sizes. Again, it's one of only 4 evidence-based reforms identified by the Institute of Education Sciences that increase student achievement, well, IES such as it was. I want to note that I do not have a personal stake in the ICT classes at SUSA. However, my background is in special education. I feel that the ICT program at SUSA must be prioritized, which I did not hear addressed in this discussion. This is a program that depends on teachers' ability to differentiate instruction and teach in small groups. To have 24, 25 kids in an ICT class truly negates the premise and the effort it took to create the ICT in the first place. I hope that the principal at SUSA is advocating for smaller class sizes across the board, but especially for the ICT classes at SUSA. Having 24 kids in an ICT class in SUSA negates the premise of creating the ICT program in the first place. In addition, I think it's important to note that per the most recently publicly available data, Port is spending about 38.4% of salaries, admin costs on classroom salaries versus 42% at Syosset, 41% in Manhasset, et cetera. So Port is also spending more on administrative costs than other districts and less on students than other districts. Port must prioritize students not just in theory, but actually in practice, especially the children who are in special education in the ICT classes. Thank you.